Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another office hours. Today we're going to be covering how to use social media to drive traffic, engagement, and revenue, among other things. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat pane, and we'll address them as we go along or where it makes the most sense. Today, as I said, we're covering social media. Think of this as a primer for publishers. We're going to talk about consumer expectation versus the reality of how different people interact with brands online, how to choose the best networks for your publication, how you could use each of those to accomplish different goals, as well as tips for using each of the major platforms. And lastly, we'll wrap up with how to use social media as part of your sales process, and how to provide value through social media to your advertisers. So first off, I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about what some of the research says, what the consumer expectation or their behavior are, and the first thing that probably won't come as a surprise to you is that Facebook and Twitter are the most popular platforms, followed closely by YouTube. Video is becoming more and more popular, and as time goes on, there's going to be more and more of that. It's going to need to be integrated into your process, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. One thing you want to think about is, what audience are you trying to reach? If your target demographic is women, then you probably want to be looking at Instagram and Pinterest a little bit more, just because I think 80% of Pinterest users are women, so it's a great place to reach them, obviously. Instagram is more popular among younger people, where Google Plus is more popular around older consumers. So, generally speaking, you want to take these things into consideration.
And I want to also look at this from another perspective. I'm going to go on a limb and say basically everyone is on Facebook. Clearly not everyone, but as far as we're concerned, basically everyone is. So the women who are on Pinterest or Instagram are likely also on Facebook. But what's also the case here is you've got fewer men on those networks, which means your message can skew and cater more towards women. Now, if you look at your own analytics on Facebook, if you're similar to many of our publishers, you're still trending at about 80% of your followers are likely women, and the engagement is heavily female-focused. But the point here is it does give you a greater sense of what is the general breakdown of the given platform or network versus the more ubiquitous nature, which is Facebook.
Yeah, that's a great point. Moving on to, we just talked about what everyone thinks and what the research says, or like how people respond when asked the question, what platform am I on? But let's talk about the reality of the situation to kind of go along with what Brian was just saying, is that when you compare what people think or say when you ask them a question to what they really do, the overall, whatever you want to call it, drops 35 to 65% across the board. So what that ultimately means is while consumers expect brands to be on an average of 3.4 platforms, they really only care about 1.6. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in choosing what the right platform is for your business as a publisher and to reach the audience you want. So what does that really mean? To kind of reiterate, again, Brian's statement, start with Facebook first. You can see here on the right, Facebook accounts for a shockingly large amount of the social traffic for all our publishers. Now, I will say that this is slightly skewed because, based on our strategy, we tell all publishers Facebook first, so there's going to be more people on Facebook than Twitter. But what we've seen is that this is true regardless. It may not be quite as skewed, but Facebook is going to be your biggest driver of traffic and engagement outside of email, to your site. Now, for those larger publishers or those more established publishers that might have a staff, we're not saying don't do the other things, but only do them once you've kind of mastered Facebook. If you don't have enough time and resources to do Facebook, then I can guarantee you won't have enough time and resources to do any of the other things, any of the other platforms the way they need to be done to be useful and valuable to you as a publisher. if you choose to go down that road of having more than just Facebook and you want to add Twitter or YouTube or Pinterest or whatever it may be, the most important thing is don't be a broken record. And what I mean by that is you cannot just post the same thing to Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest. They all have different audiences. They all have different messages. You should, people aren't going to follow you on both platforms if you're saying the same thing. You have to give them something different, a reason to follow you on those platforms. I know Brian wants to jump in here and talk about this Adopt Me story, so I'll let him do that real quick.
Yeah, we've talked in the past about the sorts of content that go viral. Your well-researched, well-articulated long-form article is probably not going to get as much readership as some of the more simple viral fodder that's available, like the Adopt Me story. I was hoping to include a picture of the dog, but we didn't have space. But it was a pit bull. And I don't know about you, but I love dogs. Pit bulls aren't my favorite, cutest variety. I think they're not as endearing as sort of a floppy-eared whatever. And the point here is this post was shared 4,100 times to Facebook. Now, you might be thinking, sure, that's probably a big market. Well, this was in a market of 32,000 people. Okay, so massive sharing to Facebook. So then you might think, well, okay, great. Well, how effective was Twitter? And you look at that and you go, wait a second. Is there a character missing? A couple digits off? There were 14 shares to Twitter. Now, Ryan's point about our publishers being more focused on Facebook is true, and it accounts for some of the variation, but it also accounts for the way people use the various mediums. Facebook is much more about sharing locally, and anecdotally I can say Twitter is much more about thought leadership and trends and global issues. And so from a local perspective, Facebook simply plays much more nicely into that. And the other piece of this is that we didn't have a spot for the statistic, but there was a research project done by a journalist at The Atlantic. Very sophisticated publication, very sophisticated journalist. He tweets a lot. And he wanted to see how much traffic does my tweeting generate for my employer. And it turned out it was pretty close to zero. More specifically, he looked at how many people does his messages reach, and do they engage, and do they retweet, and do they do all these things. And of all the activity, less than 1% resulted in a click-through to the site. So as he put it, his efforts on Twitter generate 99% of the value for Twitter, the company, and 1% for his employer, The Atlantic. Now, sure, that doesn't take into account the brand value of The Atlantic, his own brand building, and some of the softer things. But if your goal is to drive traffic, it's a good indication that Facebook is a much better place to be, hence why we say start with Facebook.
So how do you approach social media given all of the things we've already talked about? The most important thing to remember when posting to a social media platform is consistency. You cannot be sporadic in your posting. If you take long periods of time or there's gaps in between posting, one of two things is going to happen. One, you're either going to get penalized by the platform, say Facebook, right? If they don't see you posting regularly, you're not going to show up in people's news feeds, which is critical, obviously, to getting people to click through. If it's Twitter, you might get completely lost. If your message might get completely lost because there's so many people posting to Twitter that they're not going to find you anyway. The second most important thing, regardless of platform, is experiment continuously. You hear a lot of research about what's the best time to post, or what style should I be talking in, or what are the best things to post on Facebook or wherever. We've done a lot of blogs about those individual topics. I encourage you to go read some of those. But there's no right or wrong answer. And a lot of people think there's a secret sauce. And if you really want to know the secret sauce, it's this. It's to experiment and do it consistently. I had a conversation the other day with somebody, and this is outside of publishing, but it's still a relevant story, as they said, they were experimenting and they were posting, they found that posting at 8 a.m. every morning was working for them, and it worked really well for about 6 weeks. All of a sudden, it completely dried up. It could have been any number of factors. Maybe the people that they reached at 8 a.m. had already used their service and they didn't care anymore, or maybe there was a Facebook algorithm change that changed something in the background that they didn't know about. So what they did is they switched and started, posting at 2 a.m. 2 a.m. in the morning. You'd think most people were completely asleep and this would be the worst possible time to post. Turns out that worked really well for them for about 4 weeks, and then it changed again. So the outcome here is that you got to experiment, you got to try different things, and lastly, you got to have a plan. You should have different messages for each platform. We'll talk about a couple possibilities there in a few minutes. You want to set goals for each and think in terms of traffic, engagement, and revenue. Notice I did not say fans or followers. That will come organically if you're producing really great, educational, entertaining, valuable content. People will follow you. But that's not what you're in business for. You're in business to drive people to your site or to engage them in new and interesting ways and, of course, to make money. So your goals should be set accordingly. If you are going to experiment with a new social network, you need to commit to doing it consistently for at least 3 months before you make any sort of decision on whether it's valuable to you or not. When we talk about the tips, we'll talk about what consistency means on a network-by-network basis. But after those 3 months, don't be afraid to abandon or pivot. If you choose to use Twitter and it's not helping you reach your goals, maybe you're just not using the right strategy. So maybe you try a different strategy for 3 months. If you're doing this for 6 to 12 months and you're still not getting anything out of it, then you need to think about, well, maybe this is not worth my time. Maybe it's time to shut down the Twitter profile and move on and find a different thing.
So the key here is test. Now, you may fall prey to we tried it and it didn't work. If you try one thing, or you try many things the same way, and you don't mix in some variability, and you're not looking at, okay, this was time of day, time of week, seasonality, and you're not trying to understand the dynamics, it'll be very easy to get false negatives. There's a lot of posts that we've done that we thought were going to be killer that fall flat. And then we do something else, so we go, this is sort of goofy, but let's see what happens, and they explode. And so you just never know. And even to this day, in some cases, we can have a sense of why it went viral, but we don't know. Did it just so happen that there was a confluence of events where no one else posted for 3 hours, so our thing showed up everywhere? That sort of stuff happens. If you've ever been in a queue or you walk into Starbucks, you'll notice sometimes you walk in, no one's there, and you turn around and there's 50 people in line behind you. Stuff just happens. Maybe it's because of a hot issue that you just happen to tap into. You never know. So if you're going to run one of these, you got to be actually following what Ryan was saying about experimenting and testing, and sometimes even testing things that you don't think are going to work, just to see if you were right or wrong with that assumption. Then when you reach the end of the period, if it's successful, you have a sense of why. And if it's not, you have a sense of, okay, well, we sort of did everything, so it's not going to be right in our market or for our brand or whatever, as opposed to, oh, we tried it, and sure, we screwed up everything, but it's just not going to work for us. Maybe it was just the way you did it that wouldn't work. So anyways, we see publishers do this often. I want you to avoid those easy missteps if you can.
So up next, what's in it for me? And when I say that, I don't mean from the publisher's standpoint. I mean, what's in it for your readers? Here, there's no right or wrong answer to that. You've got to determine. I'll say there's no right or wrong answer other than what I have here on Facebook. I think, from what we've seen in our network of publishers, Facebook should be about staying up to date with top stories and news from the community, sharing stories from your blog, calling out individual groups and things like that. But beyond that, how you mix and match these other networks and what their purpose ultimately is something that, again, you're going to have to experiment with. But I have put together a few ideas on how to use each of these networks. For Twitter, for example, you might do, this is a place where you share all the latest deals and coupons from your community. This would be a fairly valuable resource for those looking to save money in your community, and it's not going to kind of muddy up your Facebook feed. So, people that want, this is a different message based on the platform. So people come to Facebook and follow you there to stay up to date with news, and they follow you on Twitter to get all the latest deals, right? There's a clear differentiation in the message, and also what I'm trying to achieve in terms of goals. I might just be doing that as a service to my advertisers as part of a package more so than, say, trying to drive traffic in this case. LinkedIn is a great place to educate your advertisers and prospects. There's not much of a case to have, sharing your own, community-oriented content there, but it is a great sales tool. We've had, several conversations in office hours about that in the past. If you're interested in that, you should revisit those. And then these next three are, that starts to get into more curation, user-generated content. Maybe on Pinterest you focus on creating boards with local trends, recipes from local chefs, trending fashion in your town, events or whatever it may be. Instagram, real stories from the community. Maybe you walk up and down Main Street once a month and you ask people if you can interview them, ask them the same question. Those are great videos that you could post to Instagram throughout the month, that people get excited about. YouTube, maybe they're more established videos. Maybe it's more about curation to begin with. If you see videos from businesses, maybe you have a playlist on your YouTube profile that highlights all of those. It doesn't always have to be original content. You're going to want to sprinkle some in, and we'll get into the details of that over the next few slides.
I would also encourage you, as you're looking at other media, if you're a fan of Jay Leno and he would do his walk and talk and ask people questions and he'd give funny responses. Feel free to borrow from other media, modify it for your own use. Maybe you're not doing video, maybe you are, maybe you're going to post it as specific questions, you're going to tweet at people or whatever. But take ideas and get creative. If you're going to invest in social media, sort of time, energy, and effort, get creative in trying different things. You might find you stumble upon these little fun gems that you can repeat rather easily.
So from here on out, we're going to go through each of the major platforms and talk about a few tips, things you need to consider as you're posting. And we're not going to, get into the details of character limits and those kind of things. There's plenty of great resources out there, in addition to several posts that we've done on our blog. So if you have any of those kind of detail-oriented questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. But here are some general tips, and we're going to start with Facebook because, again, we feel that this is the most important network to be on as a publisher. Probably one of the most important things you can do is use a human voice. And what I mean by that is don't try to sound like a big corporation, right? People don't connect with that. They want to hear, woohoo, way to go, ladies, like the one from Only Oswego, or other things like congratulations, Prohibition Pig, that's a restaurant in that area. What do you think, readers? Might not be the best follow on to that, but in any case, that article happened to be getting quite a bit of views this morning. Link back to articles on your site as often as possible. Now, when I say that, you could have these little things like the best burger in every state in America. Now, clearly, you can't link back to that article on your site because it's somebody else's article. But what you could do, and maybe this isn't the best example, but bear with me here, is you could do a short article on your site saying, hey, Prohibition Pig was nominated the best burger for the state of Vermont. Congratulations to them. You can link out to the directory. You can link out to the base article. Now, again, like I said, probably not the best example, but articles don't have to be super long to be effective. Only Oswego does a great job of this with press releases. They grab a paragraph, they write an article on their site, they link to it from Facebook, and now they're not only generating comments and engagement on Facebook, but they're driving traffic back to their site as well. To that end, you don't want to give away too much in the title or excerpt of the article if you're taking that approach. If you give all the information, then there's no reason for them to click and read the article. So think about how you can give just enough to get them interested, but not so much that they can kind of move on in their current process. And lastly, when you're on Facebook, images are super important. Now, that doesn't mean every post ever has to have an image. Again, you should experiment with posts with images, without images, links, whatever it may be. But when you are going to include an image, make sure it's optimized. I believe the new current size, if you're trying to get it right to fill up the entire screen, both on desktop and mobile, is 1,200 pixels by 1,200 pixels. If you upload that photo, when you're crafting a post, you'll get these nice-looking images like the ones you see here on the screen.
So just to clarify, if you're sharing content, it should have an image all the time. But that doesn't mean everything you post has to be content. You can post questions or polls or even, as we've seen in some markets with the weather, hey, anybody know some businesses that are still open today? And people respond, right? I mean, don't do that unless you already have a decent engagement on your page or you're going to hear crickets. But it's the sort of thing that you can do as you're growing out your content. And obviously, within Locable system, and frankly most content management systems, it's going to grab an image from the page. We try to provide that large image that's going to play nice. So as long as you uploaded a good one, you're going to be in a good position. And to Ryan's earlier point about not giving away too much in the content, if you have a kid who wins the state title for, running the mile, and you put in your description, congratulations to kid's name from kids high school who ran a, 3-minute and 58-second mile and took first at states, beating 24 other runners. What's left for them to see when they click on it? So it really is art and science, but we see it all the time where people write way too much. And it might get viewed, but it won't get clicked. And you need to get those clicks to go viral, and you need those clicks to go to your actual website. So, play with that. See what resonates with your readers.
Yeah, that was a much better example. Thank you for sharing that one. The next network on here is Twitter. I'm kind of going order, and I guess order of importance, although there's a lot of subjectivity here. Twitter, by default is a lot different than Facebook, meaning Facebook does their algorithm tries to display what is most meaningful to you. So out of all the things that they could show you, they're only going to show you a small percentage of it. Twitter, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite of that. If someone posts something and you're following that person, it's going to show up in your feed. And because of that, it's a lot more noisy. Also, because of that, the network becomes a lot more conversational. It requires you to interact more consistently throughout the day. I would say a minimum of 6 to 8 tweets a day on your profile, not including all the times that you're just going to respond to something that somebody else has said. So there's a huge time commitment here to running Twitter, and I think when it comes down to publishers, a lot of publishers fall flat on their face here because they don't have the time and resources to put into that. Now, if you do, feel free to do it. Don't be afraid to repeat tweets. Because of all the noise, you might post the same tweet 3 times at different parts of the day, especially if you're using that coupon example, right? Because, if you're a heavy Twitter user and, you only scroll through, say, a few pages at a time every time you jump on, so there's a high likelihood that they missed the first maybe 1, 2, or 3 messages. And the last tip I'll give you for Twitter is use lists to watch others. So if you're going to follow the coupon deal example that I gave earlier, create a list of people that you want to follow that are posting coupons and deals in your area, and then use that as a way to kind of curate the content. Obviously, you could apply that to many different, aspects there. Brian said that there's a lot of soft stuff with Twitter. So if you're going to use it for prospecting, for sales, follow all the local businesses, put them in a list. That's a way to, find out when they're running their next promotion or the next event or whatever it may be. There's a lot of different ways you can use it, but those are probably the 2 top ways at this point that we'd recommend. Pinterest. Pinterest is a fairly new platform in terms of, all the other ones, but is becoming more and more popular again, especially with women. This is a great place to highlight the great photography you have in print. Point people, if you're posting your print edition online, especially if it's in an article format, it's a great way to link back to the original story. You always want to make sure to add a description, and if relevant, the place where that was, include a link. I didn't say that here. A lot of the times that will happen automatically. Feel free to embed this in an article on your website. They have embed codes where you can take a whole board that you've created and throw it on your website if it's related. So, going back to the print example, if you have a bunch of photos from, the spring issue, create a board and throw it on your In This Issue article. It's another great way to highlight the fact that you have a presence on Pinterest. feel free to cross-share your boards to Facebook as well periodically. I mean, you're not going to do it every time, but if there's something super interesting that you just posted to Pinterest, post it to Facebook as well. Again, Pinterest is one of these harder networks to let people know that you have, so you got to take these shortcuts to, for lack of a better way of saying it, distribute your content throughout your other channels. Pinterest is also great for curating content. You see a lot of boards that are, here are my favorite recipes. You're going to want to take, if you could do something like that, you're going to want to make it as local as possible. So maybe it's your favorite recipe from this restaurant, the chef at this restaurant in town, or, here's your favorite recipe from the bakery in town. Make it about your community. Make sure you're, labeling, tagging that pin with the location so that you come up in searches for, say, Hanover, New Hampshire, which is actually what this search is here that you're looking at on screen. Again, it's about being local and being valuable. Curate, sprinkle in your original content, highlight print. There's a lot of different things you can do around Pinterest should you choose to go down that road. The next one is Instagram. Again, a younger audience, but still quite popular. Many people at least say in the younger demographic that at some point this will become more popular than Facebook. I'm not seeing that yet, at least in terms of the goals that you care about, but it's obviously something we want to keep an eye on going into the future. A couple quick keys for Instagram is be authentic. Don't worry about taking professional photos. That's not what Instagram is about. It's about, snapping things in the moment and sharing them with the people that you care about. In this case, your fans and followers. Always try to provide some context with the text, whether it's a quote from somebody, if you're taking a snapshot of a deal or, something that was going on in town, make sure to include the price or the location again. And don't be afraid to cover hot topics. Again, like we were talking about before, if you were to walk around town, you could ask, do that little, thing like all the comedy shows do that Brian was talking about and ask for their opinion on a very specific question or hot topic or whatever it may be. Shoot a bunch of videos and share them and say, this is what this person had to say. This is what, Brian had to say. It's another great way, to share a lot of visuals around your community. YouTube, again, key here, be authentic, not professional. You can use your phone to shoot a YouTube video. I just did a quick search for Hanover, New Hampshire. Again, that's where one of our publishers are, and I found a couple of videos, just people touring the town, showing off new businesses. There's a lot of different things you can do here. Now, I will say that these two titles are not very good. They're not optimized. Again, just like you would title an article, you want to title a video or any other kind of post you do appropriately. But you can use YouTube to cover local events, interview key people in the community, talk to businesses about their origin story. How did they become to be? Or if there's some kind of news that came out. One example the other day is a local business caught fire and got burnt to the ground. You could go interview the business owner. How are you handling this? Are you planning on coming back? Those are all great things you can do. And again, you can do them with your phone just by going and talking to them. It doesn't need to be professional, edited. People will actually relate better to the more authentic and organic stuff than the professionally produced videos. When you do create a YouTube video, in addition to posting it on your YouTube channel, you definitely want to create an article on your site and embed the video there. This is going to drive more traffic for you in that regard. And you can also, I've said this a few times, but curate other people's videos in a playlist on your YouTube channel. That's a great way to kind of give props and start to build up your community on YouTube as well. All right, so Google Plus is up next. Google Plus is an interesting platform because it can be super important for search engine optimization. However, most people would agree that it's kind of fallen short in being a social network. So there's kind of a catch-22 there. What I would suggest if you go down this road is at least ensure your business page is set up, if for no other reason than the search engine optimization. Now, it's only like a step one of many things you need to do with Google, which is definitely not the topic for today. But you'll notice that if your page is set up and all linked correctly, someone searched for, say, Lou's Restaurant, and the page is set up, you'll get the Google Plus page reference. So I'd make sure that's done, and then at a minimum, just share the same articles you share to Facebook. It takes an extra 10 seconds to go in and do that, and there'll be some benefits from that. And should you choose to really make Google Plus more of a priority in the future, then you can kind of ramp up and change the message and do a lot of those things. And likewise, if Google chooses to make Google Plus more of a priority and it becomes more of a necessity in the future, you'll be at least prepared for that. But beyond that, I don't recommend worrying about it too much. It's probably my least favorite social network at this point, although again, there are some benefits from a search engine standpoint should you want to address those. And I think this is last but not least, LinkedIn. Again, it's a great place to educate your advertisers and prospects. There are a lot of different options out there. Share trends about, what's happening in local marketing. Announce your offers and deadlines. If you're running a guide, make sure to say, hey, we have 3 spots available for this. Deadline is next week. If your print deadline's coming up, make sure to post that. Obviously, to build up your network, initially you're going to want to invite all your advertisers and prospects to follow your company page. And then lastly, make sure your profiles are complete and links out to your advertising page. And when I say that, I mean both your business page as well as your personal profiles, because a lot of people will maybe start on your business page, see that you're the administrator, click over to your personal profile because they know you, and you don't want to lose that opportunity to convert them at that point. So again, LinkedIn is more about sales and prospecting than it's going to be about driving traffic and engagement, but still a very useful tool for your sales team.
I heard a statistic recently that something like 35% of what's often described as very small businesses with under 10 employees, are on LinkedIn. So, it's not nearly as ubiquitous as a Facebook, but it is the right sort of people, and still it's pretty prominent. So if you're looking to network, looking at some backstory, there's some great benefits there. I was thinking that there's some additional tools you might want to look at. We use a service called Rapportive, like Rapport, R-A-P-P-O-R-T, which allows you to automatically get some basic LinkedIn info when you're doing messaging, if you use Google Mail, which we use for our corporate email. So there's some great tools that can give you some backstory that can be helpful even when just sending normal messages. So if you use Gmail in particular and you have questions about it, let us know. It's a free service.
All right, so to wrap up our discussion on social media, we're going to talk about how to leverage your social media audience to drive revenue. And we've talked a lot about it, and maybe this will sound obvious to some or the light bulb will go off for others, but social media is largely a way to drive traffic and engagement for everything else you sell, right? The packages, the banner ads, the guides, the social promotions, they all have aspects that, social media help with. Whenever you share something, whether it's an event, an article, you highlight a business, that is going to drive traffic back to your site, which then in turn makes your, advertising options more valuable to your advertisers. In terms of engagement, we talked about this I think it was a few weeks ago. You always want to cross-link all your articles on your site. So if you reference an event, you should be linking to the event in the calendar. If you reference a business, you should be linking to the directory in your listing directory. All right, that's all great for what we, engagement or discoverability. Someone might come to your site to look at one thing and then see this other thing, and they go over to the the directory and they see 3 other events they might be interested in, and all of a sudden, your traffic can quadruple really quickly because people are spending more time on more pages of your site, which again comes back to building your audience. When you post to Facebook and you're talking about a business or a person, you want to make sure to tag them. That's when I say that, I mean you want to say like @ and then the business name, and it will automatically link and notify those businesses that you've talked about them. These are all little things that you can do to help leverage your audience and make everything you do, whether it's on social or on your website or even in print, more valuable to your advertisers. Now, going beyond that basic level of stuff that you should just be doing, you can also include paid placements on social media. We've had a few different publishers. More of our online-only publishers have been doing this, but it's basically something you share to Facebook that's a little bit more salesy, but still value add to the readers. The example here I grabbed from York Tewksbury today, and quite frankly, I don't know if this was a paid placement or not, but it reads like one. It's, Realtor Donna Rosenblatt listens to you and understands your needs, make your dreams of home ownership come true. Right? You can clearly tell that that's a sales pitch. If you do that periodically and you have a great engaged audience, that's okay. If that's all you're doing, then I can guarantee you're not going to go very far with Facebook. So let's make sure that, there should probably be like a 1 to 30 ratio for every 30, article shares, questions, polls, whatever that are really for the readers. You can slip in one of these paid placements. That's probably your minimum amount that you want to do there. The last thing you can do, especially when you're selling bigger packages, is include paid promotions as part of the package. And what I mean by that is, if you're selling a banner ad with an advertorial and featured events and a social promotion, build into the price of the package some paid Facebook ads or whatever the equivalent is on the other platforms. This will basically help you guarantee reach, because with Facebook ads in particular, you can target the fans of your page as well as the friends of those fans. And when you do the math out, for those of you who've heard me talk about social media math in the past, you can quickly guarantee 10, 20, 30,000 with a very small amount of budget for that, 10 to 20, 30,000 impressions, that is. And it's a great way to then just kind of, it's another stat you can go back to your advertiser with. And hey, in addition to the 10,000 people you reach with your banner ad on our site, so reach 50,000 on Facebook, we've sent out, 5 different emails over 3 months or whatever it may be, and we have 1,000 people on our list, so there's another, several thousand impressions. It all kind of adds up in the end. The important thing to remember, we say this a lot, is it's all about the audience. You're telling the story about reaching the people that they want to reach in your community. Don't be afraid to highlight your social influence if you have a really great Facebook following. But just remember that it's, at the end of the day, they care about traffic, engagement, and reach, right? They don't care about anything else. Social is just one way of delivering that message to your audience. You also have print. You also have email. You also have your website. You may also have other social platforms. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of putting all this together in your head. And with that, that pretty much wraps up the office hours for today. We'll stick around to answer any more questions. Feel free to type those into the chat pane. Thanks, and we'll catch up with you next week.